Hello and welcome to The Artist Appeals. I'm your host, Erin Sparler, and in this podcast, we talk about the business of art. We talk about how to make money with your art. In fact, this podcast is focused on the 7 steps to make money with your art. We talk about art, product, presentation, educating your audience with story, amplifying through automation, licensing and contract, terms, simplified in plain English, and success. How do you measure it? How do you find it? In an attempt to put all this in context, we have been interviewing everybody we can get our hands on, from photographers to designers, quilt makers, collectors, CEOs of big craft companies, editors-in-chiefs of famous art magazines, fine artists, everybody and anybody. We talk to them all, seeking the secret sauce to how to make a living with your art. I'm glad you've decided to join me, and I hope you'll enjoy today's episode. So welcome to The Artist Appeals. In this episode of The Artist Appeals, we're going to speak with a gentleman who is a photographer. His mother studied with Jerry Ullsman, and then he also studied with Jerry Ullsman. He grew up in this amazing house that had thousands of artwork surrounding him, photographs from some of the biggies in modern photography. He went on to study neuroscience and then went on to work in the film industry. He's worked with Lucasfilms, Netflix, Adobe. He has worked on the CBS miniseries Lonesome Dove, as well as Paul McCartney's concert film Get Back. And he's been the author of several books and lots of essays, primarily on filmmaking. But now he's turned his eye to photography and on to educating and helping people learn about photography. And he's taken a very unique approach, one that is near and dear to my heart. And that is this idea of photography, any art form really, as a form of Zen, as a form of meditation. Yes, that's right. He's presenting photography as a way to get calm. He has a fantastic website that you can explore, NeoModern, and he also has a podcast as well. And he teaches workshops in Santa Fe. He shares all this and more in today's interview. I'm very excited to share with you a fantastic interview and talk with the photographer, Michael Rubin. Hello, Ruben. How
I'm
are
I'm
you?
good, Aaron. How are you doing?
Fantastic. I'm excited to have you on the program. Now, you have your own podcast.
I do. Hold on. Is this audio working? Are we actually can you hear me?
Yeah, you sound great.
Oh, just making sure. You can never tell with technology today. And it's the end of
Oh, I
2020,
know.
so anything could happen. There was an earthquake in San Francisco this morning. I think that's par for our year.
Now, are you in San Francisco?
Mm, I'm not anymore. Just left a few months ago and I'm on my way to Santa Fe, New Mexico, but I'm in my old
Ah,
house in Santa Cruz, which is just down coast from San Francisco. It's great. I love being here. Holed up with my
cool.
children. Yeah, it's been good.
I went to grad school in San Francisco.
Did you? Where were you?
Yeah. I went to the Academy of Art College, which is
Oh,
now the Academy of Art University, and I
yeah,
lived in the Fog District out by
I know.
West Portal.
Sure. I like it out there. I honestly, I like the fog. I'm a big fog fan. I was very
It's
happy in San Francisco.
fantastic. It's very, moody, and as a photographer, I imagine that that was well, I mean, that's actually kinda where I cut my teeth learning a little bit of photography in the Fog District, hiking those, stairways
Hmm.
between the different, neighborhoods.
It's great
I
out
mean, there's,
there.
like, 100 or something of those stairwells?
Yeah, Ansel Adams lived out there. That's where he was born and grew up, out on
I
in
did
that area.
not.
Yeah.
No
I
way.
mean, he did move
Cool.
down to Carmel, but yeah, he's from San Francisco. He broke his nose in the earthquake of 1904 or something. That's why he has that kind of weird nose if you look at his pictures.
No, I did not know that. I
Yeah.
love the little trivia. Thank you.
Just for the fog people out on the
Yeah.
out on the west side.
So I gotta
Yeah.
ask, I
Hmm.
always kind of start with art and
Mm,
what you make. So you're a photographer, you've got your own podcast, and
mhm,
you've got this new domain that you just mentioned you appropriated, NeoModern, which I love that name for a website, NeoModern.
mhm.
Neo meaning new, right? And then
Yeah.
modern, so it's like new.
Yeah, well, I mean, it comes
Like shrimp
from,
scampi. Shrimp.
I have this jumbo shrimp. It's not it's a redundant, right? Um,
Right.
well, no, jumbo shrimp would be an oxymoron, right? That's an example of an
I think
oxymoron.
shrimp scampi is shrimp, some because
Oh,
scampi is,
yeah,
the
yeah.
word for shrimp, so it's
That's
really
what
you're
people
saying, "I
that's what
want
people
shrimp."
that's what people say about the La Brea tar pits, which I believe is
What?
the La Brea tar pits in Los Angeles. La Brea
Uh-huh.
means the tar pits, so it's sort of the tar pits, which makes no sense. Just what you started this. I'm just
I did.
picking it up where
We
you
could go
left
down
it.
a road. Well, that's what I do. I start random side, uh, non sequiturs on this.
Good. But so you had asked about neo-modern. No,
Yes.
like 3 years ago, I left my job at Adobe, and I decided I was just going to be full-time photographer. I was
Brave
of
man.
age. I had a great career, and it's like, you know what? I spend my off times taking pictures. I'm just gonna do this all the time and figure out by doing it how to make a living doing it, or something like that. Um,
Yeah.
and I've been taking pictures and selling them like ad hoc for a few years, but I just was done with the technology business, the startup business that I'd been in for most of my career,
Mm,
and then I had an idea. While I was doing it, what I ran into was like people would buy my pictures, and the hardest part of being a photographer was getting it matted and framed when they would buy it, and I would spend
right.
almost as much on that as on the print,
Right?
and it was pissing me off. Like, I can't believe how hard. Why is this so expensive, and why is this so difficult? And combine that with I have a large art collection that I manage, like thousands of mid-century modernist photographic prints. Ansel
Oh,
Adams, Aaron
really?
Weston. Yeah, I gotta.
You collected them, or,
Well, I
is this
managed
for a
it. It was
gallery,
my
or I'm
family.
confused.
My family, my dad and I did this, and when he passed away, it fell to me full time
Aw,
to manage and run it.
okay.
And there are literally thousands of prints, so I wasn't really
Oh,
sure like what I should
fascinating.
be doing. But here's the thing: no matter with all of those prints, it didn't matter the size of the image or the shape of the image. They actually weren't in their museum framing that we had for them, the matting and framing. They were actually quantizing into a couple different sizes. There'd be like 16 by 20 or 20 by 24. There just
Mhm,
they wouldn't be every different size. They would actually be a set number of sizes. And I
mhm.
realized that custom framing is bullshit. Can I say that on your show?
Yes, you
But
can. Well, if you
custom
haven't heard our episode with Ashley Longshore, I don't think you can outdo her with
okay,
swearing,
I won't
but you
try.
can give it a try.
You know
I'll
what?
just put a
Hope
disclaimer on the front.
hope springs eternal. So I had all these this information that said, people think they want custom framing and it's very expensive to do, but what if we just did custom matting? What if we
Mm,
could take any size picture, any shape picture, and just basically matted them as if you were at a museum and they go into the 20 by 24 frame and you just mat it for that.
yes.
And that way you can have a very small number of frames. You can custom cut the mats,
Mhm.
and then people can get it very customized but affordably because you can do it at scale. And so
Love it.
I opened this gallery on Union Street in San Francisco, and people would walk in with their
I
phones.
know
Our
it.
staff were experts at Photoshop, and they would
Uh-huh,
sit with you for about 10, 15 minutes, fix up your picture, custom print it out like a museum print, large.
uh-huh.
Then they would custom cut a mat and frame it, and it was done in 30 minutes.
Brilliant. I
Well,
love it.
almost brilliant. It was a it was a pretty good thing, and it was growing. And I was trying to build the online side of it because the store
Mhm,
was its own thing, very exciting. And then when COVID hit, I just couldn't keep it up. The rent was astronomical, and I
mm,
just had to bail.
too much overhead.
It was too much overhead, and I was bummed. I'd been doing it for many years, and I loved the business. The community loved it. It was sort of a hub for photographers in San Francisco. But I had this, in the process of doing it, I created a podcast about photography, and I
Mhm.
had a domain. NeoModern is the name of the business. And
Mhm.
so when I closed it down, I've shifted into education, teaching photography. I have a new curriculum for photographers that I think is better than anything that's been created. And so I just put it under the banner of NeoModern.
I
And
wanna hear about it.
that's what I'm doing. So anyway, and the podcast, we still do it. It's called Everyday Photography Every Day.
Mhm.
And my partner Suzanne Fritz Hansen, she and I've been doing it for a couple of years, and she is fantastic. And we just talk about photography, not technical stuff. It's we talk to artists and people in the photography world just about everything but the technical part, all the other stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I noticed I found you through I was, doing a little digging about Maggie Taylor, who I love and have
Mm,
been following for years, and, it's kinda one of these rabbit hole things. I just interviewed John Paul Caponegro. He grew up knowing Jerry Ullsman. He was
mhm.
at the table with Jerry Ullsman and met Ansel Adams, and, Jerry Ullsman then was married to Maggie Taylor, and so I just went down this rabbit hole, and I popped onto your website, this NeoModern, and I saw that you're into photographic Zen,
Mm,
photographic haiku, and I'm big time into the Zen of art. This idea that art can be a meditation. I mean, they've proven that Zen tangling and that repetition of mark making can take you into the flow state quickly and easily. And the flow state is very similar to like what the athletes get into with the zone. So
yeah.
here I am finding somebody that's exploring this side of that aspect of art as meditation in photography. And I certainly have found that I do a lot of uh, what are called internal multiple exposures. You probably know the term,
Mm,
but I take two photographs on the same piece of film,
cool.
and doing that, looking for one piece and then looking for shape that matches the other would be very relaxing. Very like you come up out of it and you're like, "Oh, what?" Like you're almost confused.
Yeah. Oh, I love a good, I mean, true of any art project where you just
Yeah.
like the best thing is when you look up and you realize it's 3 in the morning. It's like, wow, that's crazy. That was irresponsible of me on a Wednesday to do that, but but you do, and
I love it.
that's great.
Well, I
But
love
I
this. So
got bad
tell me
news for
about
you.
your workshop a
I have
little.
bad news for you because that isn't
Oh.
specifically what the course is about. I mean, you
Oh,
sort of have it where most people who talk about Zen and photography are in fact talking about what you have asked about being present and finding that center and
yes.
slowing down. That is not what I teach. I love
Oh,
that.
come
I love
on.
that. But you would need to be a Zen master to teach that, and I'm not a Zen master. I'm a student. I'm an eternal
Yes.
student. But
Aren't we all?
what I recognized was after 40 odd years of taking pictures that I couldn't put my finger on what it was I did exactly that I liked about my photography, other than to say that my parents urged me not to do it as a career. They urged me to do it as a passion, as a hobby on the side, whatever,
I'm
and
very
not.
responsible of them.
It was very responsible and wise because my first job was with George Lucas at Lucasfilm, and I've worked at I was one of the early people at Netflix, and I was at Adobe, and I've had a very
Uh,
creative
that's really
entrepreneurial
cool.
career, but I took pictures the whole time. I've always been
Mhm.
taking pictures. So I'm actually 40 years as an amateur. 40 almost 50 years as a person, as if you had a smartphone in your pocket and you pulled it out and you took a picture. That's what I was doing before it was easy to do. I just had a camera and there was no reason for it other than I was doing it for fun. And you start to ask
Mhm.
yourself the question, why am I taking pictures again? Like, what's the point of this? What was and you wonder, like, what is worth taking a picture of? At some point you hit this reductio ad absurdum, kind of, you take it to the extreme, and it's like, life is short. Why am I taking pictures of things and saving them? And is that for
Yeah.
me? Is that for other people? Is it for
Yeah.
recognition? So the class came about because
Uh-huh.
I've always loved haiku, and I've often referred to my photography as haiku, and I've some photographers do that. But I started researching haiku a few years back, and what I learned was that the things I knew about it weren't entirely right. And the more I learned about how great haiku masters work and what the art of haiku, I realized that you could almost take many of the words out of their descriptions and put in photography, and they were talking about my work. That was
Mm.
exactly the way I thought about photography, and it kind of gave me this sort of philosophical underpinning to what I was doing that before was just sort of an idiosyncratic thing I did. And so that got me into what is haiku? It's this poetry form. It's a
Mhm.
Zen art. What are the other Zen arts? And as I started looking at a number of other Zen arts, like kintsugi, which is fixing broken ceramics with gold,
So
or
beautiful.
drawing the enso, which
Mhm.
I know many people are into, just drawing these circles. It's a
Yeah, I've
calligraphy.
done it for 3 years.
Yeah. So all of those are Zen arts.
Yeah.
Origami to some degree. Ikebana is
Mm.
flower arranging, right?
Mhm, mhm.
And as I
And
dug into
bonsai.
yeah, and bonsai, yes. So as I dug into each of these arts, and there ended up being six that I was particularly fascinated by, I just felt that they informed photography. That if you don't need to study Enso or study Ikebana to recognize what it is about what they're doing, what it is about it that's special, and
Mhm.
that can inform your photography. So I would say I'm using Zen arts to make people better photographers, to have meaning in their photography, not using photography to achieve Zen goals of mindfulness.
Okay,
If
I
if
like the distinction.
if that happens, that's great. If you develop an art form, that's great. But this is a standalone thing. If you're a beginner, it helps inform how you start into photography. And if you're super
Mhm,
advanced, when I've talked to really advanced photographers, often the thing they're wrestling with is they don't know how to improve. They're already very good. They don't know
mhm,
why they're doing it. They're getting bored. They're sort of plateauing out. And
mhm.
having treating photography as the newest Zen art is a pure way to approach this. It's really nice. It seems to address all that stuff, and I think it will make people better photographers. So that is what I'm teaching, is the
Oh, that sounds
application of that.
fascinating to
Yeah.
me. I mean, I would be into that because 'cause I've been painting Enso for, like, 3 years and exploring, the combination of different modern, mediums and drips and iridescence and so forth and so on, but I've always loved that Japanese aesthetic of simplicity, or the idea that the negative space is just as important as the positive space.
Yes, you get that in
Um,
Ikebana as well. You start to
yeah.
recognize those rules of photography, um, compositional rules like the rule of thirds or leading
Mm,
lines, things like that.
mhm. S
You,
shapes, V
I
shapes.
cannot tell you how much that makes me crazy, and I want to kill people with a fork. It's just it is so wrong-headed, and it's not that it doesn't have an element of truth. It wouldn't have persisted as long as it did if it wasn't a good Monday morning quarterback way to look at things. But it isn't what any photographer does. I've never if you talk to professional photographers, they all say the same thing. Learn that rule and then you can throw it out. And you look at all these great pictures and they say they don't if you're advanced, you don't even follow that. That's wrong. That's a crappy rule that is like everybody who uses it who gets good doesn't use it anymore. And
Right.
I find that rules of Ikebana about the weight of emptiness and the balance of lines and line and form and harmony of these elements and a lot of the things that you care about as you do Ikebana are what you care about when you do photographic composition. You do it organically. If I ask you to balance a ruler on your finger, you might put your finger at the 6-inch point on the ruler and it will balance, and you'd say that's how you balance it. But the rule isn't that you put your finger on the 6-inch point, because if I give you a stick that's all gnarly, that isn't going to
Mhm.
work. So it
Mm.
only works in a very unusual circumstance that's how you'd tell someone to do it. But the truth is, you learn to balance by feeling it, and
Tell me
that's
more about the, what did you call it? The balance of emptiness? The weight of emptiness. I haven't heard that term before. I wanna know.
Oh, well, you seem to resonate with that. You recognized yourself in the Enso, the power of the space. People don't. If you get too caught up in objects, you
Mhm.
miss that a composition is not a composition of objects, but of basically of light and dark shapes and of form and emptiness, and they all have
Uh-huh.
their own kinds of weight to them. And your job as an artist is always arranging those things in a frame for whatever purpose, right?
Hmm.
So I am a big I'm a big fan of using those arts to just reframe the way you think about, certainly in our case, photography. And I and I
Hmm.
and I yes, if you didn't if emptiness didn't have weight, it's like dark matter in space. Like you need
I,
it to
I
have
knew you were
weight.
going to go there. I knew it.
You need to have weight to that stuff, or all the math doesn't work. And so that's another reason why those compositional rules piss me off. They're just I think I wouldn't bash them so much if I didn't actually think they were made it harder to learn photography, not easier. If it really made it easier, then maybe it's an okay stepping stone. But I think that it gets in the way of how you need to think about stuff. And I have a proposal, which is what my classes are about, of how
Yeah.
you can think about it so it is easier. That's my
Oh, I want to hear it then.
yeah.
So, what is your class called? You've got the NeoModern website, right?
Right.
And then,
I was teaching them just through my website last year, here and there, and the courses are now being offered by the Santa Fe photographic workshops.
okay,
So the first one through Santa Fe is offered January 5th, and that'll
this
run
year,
this year.
are
Yeah.
you going through with it? With
Well,
COVID and everything, you guys gonna
well,
wear
it's
masks?
no, that's not going to be in person yet. There's just no way they can do that.
Digital?
It's online. Yeah, it's an online
Okay,
class,
okay. So
and
people can sign up now and still join because there's still time. Oh, no, wait. This probably won't air until February because the fourth season starts here in February. My apologies.
oh,
Oh,
but the
will you
first
have another
class
one
is sold
after
out.
it?
The first class is already sold out, but there's another one that's
Congratulations.
after that that I think will still be available potentially by the time this airs. So
Oh,
they should
fantastic.
check in with that.
What's
And
the website?
the Santa Fe. Well, if you go to the
I have it.
neomodern.com,
Wait, let me read it.
there'll be links to Santa Fe
Yes.
from there.
Yes, it is santafeworkshops.com and neomodern.com, right?
Yes.
Uh, yeah. Yep, I've got them pulled up. And we'll put links down below for everybody as well. So if you're interested in joining.
Yeah.
Well, very cool. So you are a photographer. You make art based on Zen and Zen practices. And, we talk about in the podcast, I try and keep things organized by the acronym APPEALS. So we talk about art, then we talk about products, because really, in order to make more time to do more art, you have to have something that you can sell so that you can pay the bills.
Hmm.
Um, and it's always interesting to me to find out the different ways that different creatives do this. Everybody comes at it from a different way. How do you make your photography into a product?
Well, it's funny you say that. I have an unorthodox feeling about photographic product, and I think it's best described. I call it one print only. And
Mm,
for my work, and this is just for me, but if other people did this, it would be, maybe we have a movement. But I
a
only ever
movement. That's what we need, baby.
I
I'm
only
all
ever
about the isms.
I only ever make a single print of a photographic image, ever.
For real?
Yeah.
Not even another one with, like, say, different values or
If it's
different
meaning
compositional cropping
if it's
or
meaningfully different, and that would have to be that's a judgment you'd have to determine, but if it's
okay.
meaningfully different, I guess I wouldn't object. But generally speaking, of any particular image, there's only one original. There's one
Hmm.
master, there's one print of that. The reasons for making photographic prints, it used to be because you had to make a print to see it, and if you ever wanted to be seen or in a gallery or in a magazine, there would be additional prints, and they were all
Mhm.
over the place. But that isn't the case anymore. Your digital image can circulate widely. It can be all over people, or you can license it. You could do a million things to make money with that image. There's no reason to have more than one original, like not anymore. It's kind of an epi phenomenon of an older era where you had to make galleries. They want you want people to collect your work. I get it.
Mhm.
There is that desire to sell more, and if you have a great image that lots of people want, I mean, come on. Ansel Adams at the end of his life was practically running off Moonrise Hernandez. He was just printing money. People were offering a lot of money, and he would just make another one. I don't want to do that. I think that we're in an era where there's so much photography, and there's so much imagery, and people can make it so easily that I would just assume that I will make one original. If someone owns that print, then that's who owns the print. And if someone else wants it, they need to talk to that person in a secondary market, and I'm out of it. I make the
Mm,
one that I put my heart into. It's the master, it's my best version of it. And that's it. If someone buys it, great. And I count on the fact that I'm prolific and I'm always
mhm,
evolving, that if the picture you want isn't available, I have lots of other prints. But I'm
mm.
not going to just make another one of that and start, just meeting demand. And I understand that
Fascinating.
it's a controversial position. If you were already successfully selling lots of prints, you would find that a ridiculous waste of money. But for most photographers, they're not selling a lot of prints. They're making their money through other methods, either photography as a service, or they're hired specifically for something, or they're licensing content, or there's business. But the physical print and the sale of that print, I find I just want to have one. So that's my
Y-
soapbox about
You
selling
know,
prints.
Ruben, I think that's fascinating because you're a photographer, and photographers are always in this debate about limited edition
Hmm.
versus open editions. And I think you're the first photographer I've ever heard say that they want to pull an original. Now, I've actually interviewed Ashley Longshore, and she only sells originals, but she does painting, right? And
Right.
she doesn't make any prints of her originals. And from her position, this makes her more valuable. It's a value proposition.
Sure.
Her originals are quite valuable. There's only one of them, although she does do series, of
Sure.
say Ruth Gaynor. Um, she'll do 5, 6, 7, 8 of them, or of whoever she's depicting, Audrey Hepburn or whatever,
Hmm.
and she'll change them a little bit, but I mean, it really drives the prices up. But you're the first photographer
Well, I
that
think
I've ever
photographers,
encountered.
we commoditize our own work. I think that we are the problem. There's always been a debate whether photography is some sort of mechanical reproduction. It's not like painting. And
Hmm.
and the fact that we can make 10 identical copies is, I mean, it's great that we can do that, but the minute we do that, or even making two, and it's a slippery slope, but so you make two, you make four, you have some sort of radical additioning, you're still running them off at some level. There's multiple copies of it. And I think
Hmm.
that's the problem. We are the ones who create this sort of sense that anything can be run off. And if all photographers only ever made one print, signed it, that was the one, then, for me, I consider the online use of images, of my images, advertisement for my print.
Mm.
I mean, you want people to see your
Yeah.
pictures, but I don't. But
Yeah.
as the people love the picture more and more and more, it drives up the price of the original, and I'm paying
Mhm.
attention to that. But for right now, I have a flat rate for the print, for the originals. That's what they cost, and I'm relatively unconcerned as long as I get attribution that, and they're not being used commercially. I love to see my images all over the place. I don't.
That's fascinating, and it helps your collector as well.
Right,
So it
right. I'm
makes
doing them a
the
favor.
value of the collector's work appreciate, and it creates an asset for them.
Yes. Think how cool it is when you see a picture online and feel like not just that I have one, but I have it. I
A V
have that picture.
one.
I have the one. And I mean,
Interesting.
when I have a picture, I mean, like I said, I have this large art collection. You can't tell when you look at a photograph whether the artist made one, and that's a weird one. He made it one day, and that was the only time he ever printed it. It makes it very
Mhm.
valuable. Or he, like Cartier-Bresson, in the '70s, he was just running them all. Certain pictures he might have 100 of. Like
Mm.
anybody in the planet who wants that print could get one. And I kind of
Mhm.
feel like, okay, for the classics in the day where people were silver printing and they're from the 1950s, I guess you can get away with that. There's still not that many of them. But today, when we can make them so easily and that we've lowered the bar, there's no dark room. I'm just printing on some sort of high quality inkjet printer. It's like, I think the responsibility is on us to self-regulate what we're doing. And so that's why I've adopted this kind of harsh position.
Mm.
Yeah.
In a way, it also streamlines the process for you, to make more work, because if you have a very valuable piece and people want prints and prints and prints, do you spend all your time,
Living in the
um
past.
well, appeasing or producing, becoming a manufacturer for the demand, or do you spend time creating new work? So it
Right.
frees you up, I guess, to create and print new work and
Yes,
get
keep
more work
growing,
out there.
keep growing. Like it's
Hmm.
all, and honestly, I wish I could just know that there was a huge market for all of my work, but the truth is that isn't the case.
Mhm.
And the less I care about it, the better my work gets. Like the minute I
Interesting.
stop thinking about pandering a little bit to the audience, oh, those are the kinds of pictures people have been buying. I guess I should start focusing on that stuff, the landscapes or the nudes or whatever the thing is.
Mhm.
And I think, get them out of my head. I know that makes good business sense. I'm an entrepreneur. I do business, but I don't know that I want that in my art. I want to create art to satisfy myself, my own curiosities, my own aesthetics. And the
Mm.
more I settle back into the truest part of that, the satisfying myself, the work gets better. That is the stuff that ends up selling. It always surprises me that when I give up on what I thought was being smart business wise, I'm going the wrong direction. And giving up on the business stuff and just focusing on the art is the right direction. That's what I.
Well, I think it's interesting because inevitably, I was talking about this with one of the guests. Inevitably, it is the piece that I least expect somebody to like that they will like, that will resonate with them, whether it
No
be my
talent
art
or taste.
agent.
Yeah.
He will always pick something that, I think, oh God, that is so messy. And he'll
Mhm.
say it's painterly, or something
Yeah.
like that.
My sister used to
Um,
say, she'd say, "I think you're a good photographer, but I don't think you know which pictures of yours are the good ones."
do you think that's the case with all artists?
Probably. I think it's very hard to know your own stuff. I mean, there's stuff that you feel strongly it articulates that thing you were trying to do, but at the end of the day, it's interesting to see what other people think is your good stuff, and it's really
Yeah.
not always what you think it is.
But I do think you have to be cognizant of trends and you do have to produce a lot of work. I mean, one of the things I hear you saying is that by only doing one, you can produce more, which I do think is one of the common themes. I'm trying to find these common themes, these common threads that run through all creatives so that in all creative fields to help people understand what are the important aspects for making a living in creativity. And one of the common threads that I hear is this creation of a lot of work, of
Mhm.
creating over and over and over again, every day if possible. And certainly photography makes that so easy, especially now that we have iPhones and we have these really beautiful, competent high pixel cameras right in our pocket. You can pull them out and you can take, 1,500 pictures in a day.
Mhm.
Um, Creating a lot of work is what helps you find your artistic voice. And that seems to be one of the common threads is that you just need to create more and more and more and more and more and more. I mean, Picasso was so prolific,
I
right?
know,
The
and
best artists are
I find
so
that the
prolific.
most inspiring thing. Going to the Picasso Museum in Paris, and you realize that the guy would make a picture on a bucket. He would just, he would just draw or paint on
For real? Did he?
anything. Oh yeah, he would do on plates, and he would just paint on fabric, and he would just. He had there was no rules, there's no limits, and he would do all kinds of stuff. He did it all the time. He might pay for a dinner at a restaurant by drawing a picture on a napkin and handing it to the owner. I mean, like he was just prolific. There's a painter who I love in LA named Gronk, and he does the
Gronk.
same.
What a cool
Gronk,
name.
he's super cool guy. And I've
You'll
looked
have
at.
to introduce me.
Oh yeah, he's great. He's great. And that's what he does. Like I found a picture of his that I bought at a flea market or something, and I've given it to the San Jose Museum of Modern Art. Um, and it was.
Nice.
I asked him about it, and he was like, "Oh, I think I paid my rent with that one year." He just was like, I can't remember, but like that's how if that's what you got when you're an artist, and I love that. So, um, you know, I, there's this feeling that the hardest thing in art sometimes is when you paint something, you make a creation, you're an architect, you build a building, whatever the thing is,
Uh-huh.
and then you give it away or you sell it, and it's not a sale, it's more like an adoption. It's like someone is taking
Yes.
over the ownership and the care and loving and feeding of this thing. And for me, making multiple prints is antithetical to that. Like I want to have that
Mm.
same feeling a painter has, which is a sadness when a picture sells. Photographers don't usually feel that way. It's like, oh, let's make another one. The sense that
Mm.
that I created it with my own hands, and then someone took it away from me. I
You know,
mean,
that's strange, Ruben, because you've hit on something that, I went to photography because I couldn't give up the originals, the paintings and the mixed media work that I did. I couldn't part with that
mm,
without pain.
well, that's your
And for
work then,
me,
huh?
well, it's still all in the closet. I've got archives and archives. But I went to photography as a way to be able to let go of it, to separate from it, because it was reproductions. And I find it fascinating that you want that experience of giving up that baby you know I always worry, is somebody going to throw it away? Are they going to
They
burn it?
might,
I don't
they
know.
might. That's what every artist feels, and for photographers not to feel it is to exclude themselves from this family of creators who experience that. I think that it's
Ah.
part of the creative process to create.
Huh.
It's almost the Buddhist notion of the sand mandalas. You create them and then they're
Mm.
ephemeral; they just go away. To cling to it as if it has permanence, I think, is the wrong avenue here. I think it's better to think of it like an animal that you're letting go because you love it. If you love something, set it free. Otherwise, you end up
Mm.
with all your pictures in your own closet, and then you die, and that sucks,
Mm.
right? You don't want that. You'd rather have them all be out there.
Oh, I'm on the closet route, man.
Oh, let it go. Let them go. Set them free. You love them.
Oh,
You
thank
love
you.
them.
I
Yeah.
love it. I love it. Are you enjoying the Artist Appeals? I know I love recording it. This is just a quick break to encourage you to get your free download of the top 4 things that you can do to make money with your art at howtomakemoneywithyourart.com. So get your free download at howtomakemoneywithyourart.com today. And now back to your regular program. Well, I love that we can talk a little bit about Buddhist and Zen and stuff. I mean, isn't the tenant, um, let me see here. Desire is the root of all suffering. Isn't
Mm,
that one of the main tenets of the idea of letting go? Is that desire, this
mm,
need to cling,
mm.
creates suffering.
Yeah. I thought it was Yoda
Um,
who said that, but yeah, it could be a Buddhist thing too. Um,
and this is the way.
this is the way. But I think that's right. And the sooner, once you go through a couple near-death experiences and some tragedies in your life, you get a few miles behind you. Um, you recognize the degree that of our impermanence, our transience,
Hmm.
and and I have to be honest. When my father died, and I took over,
Sorry.
uh, not your fault, I think. Promise. I'm not holding you responsible.
I have not intentionally killed
Okay,
anybody
good.
that I know of.
Okay, we will have a conversation about this if I find otherwise. However, uh, I've spent a number of years since his passing sort of dealing with his stuff. And unlike,
Ooh.
and it's not bad stuff. That's the thing. It's great stuff. He was a pack rat of great stuff. That's why I have this giant art collection that I manage. And he had lots of interesting things. But like, do you want to spend your life managing stuff? And
Mm.
so suddenly, as I'm managing his stuff as his child, I'm thinking at my own stuff. Like, what do I really need? What do I want to subject my children to dealing with? Like, what is important? And I realized that certainly from my photographs, boy, I don't want to die with any of those at home. I want them to all be in people's homes. I want them all disseminated and free out there. And they have to be prints. I also believe strongly that it's not photography if you don't print it. It is
Uh,
literally not photography if you don't print it. You can, I mean, it's great. It's a beautiful
uh-huh.
thing. It's a photographic art. But if you do not make a physical print, there's a number of reasons that I'm not going to go into why I don't think you hit that bar of making a photograph as an object. It's that
Yeah.
even if you're making a bunch of them, you got to stick your stake in the ground somewhere and say, this is the way that thing is supposed to look. This is a good enough one to merit being printed. And this is how you need to see it. That area is dark and this area is light and it's this shape. You decide that stuff. And to abdicate that responsibility is missing the whole point of being a creator.
I think that is well said. You worked for all these virtual, Lucasfilms, Netflix, Adobe, and my master's is actually in computer animation,
Mm,
3D,
cool.
and I couldn't stand it after spending 2 years doing a thesis project. A 2-minute animation took me, a year and a half, 2 years to put together with, uh,
The team.
working with other people and blah blah blah. And then somebody would watch it and they'd be like, "Oh, that was sweet. That was great. Okay, what's next?"
Right.
And it's
Right.
dated by the time you've released it. So if it's virtual, is it real? I've always wondered that. If it only exists in the digital ones and zeros realms, does it really exist at all?
Well, I mean, I won't argue whether it exists or not, but I would say that the printing is a piece of work. And while it is way easier today to make a print than it ever used to be, I mean, I've sat there, I've got hundreds of thousands of pictures in Lightroom on my computer.
Mhm.
I've got a
Mhm.
professional printer, I've got money, I can print anything I want. And when I go sit down to print something, I look at it and I think, mm, nah, that just doesn't quite, it's not quite there. I don't want to print that. I am vetting at that last instant when just because I have to spend $10 more on ink and paper, I'm looking at it a little harsher and I think it
Mhm.
doesn't make the cut. That is an important line for an artist to set. This isn't quite
Mhm.
good enough to make it to the print form. and
Mhm.
and everything about photography is about editing. Like, we see the world in 360 degrees across, with a continuum of time. A photograph is a sampling of a very small piece of time in a very small part of space, and we're choosing to keep that. We're saving that moment in time in
Yeah,
that
that
vantage point.
millisecond.
But we're extending it. It's like we're rendering it. We're
Mhm.
expanding what was only a fraction of a second into 10 minutes of staring at that moment. Like,
Mm.
what demands to be stared at longer than you would normally look at that thing?
Oh, you've
That's
just reminded me of a critique I had with a really, really strong photographer, Laura Jean. Anyways, she said, "Why are you asking someone to look at this photograph? Why are you taking time out of their day?"
yes, great,
And I
great.
was like,
She's right.
"Oh,
That's
yeah."
right. If you're going to stick a moment in front of me, make it worth my time.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
there's so many moments that people are demanding we look at now. We're overwhelmed by visuals. I gotta know, it's been coming back to me over and over again as we're talking about printing and presenting work. Um, what do you do with your test prints? So to pull a print, I know that John Paul will run, dozens of prints to get that final print. What do you do with the sample prints, or is the one the one?
No, because it takes work to get to the one. The
Yes.
one is the
So what do you do
final
with your
for
proofs?
the
Go to Burning Man
I
and burn them?
I don't need to go to Burning Man to do it. I have all of the technology available to me right here. It's called a razor blade. I just cut them up, and that's all you got to
Oh,
do.
really?
Yeah, you just get rid of them. I mean, you stare at it and you ask yourself. I mean, this is the question I ask myself: would I be embarrassed if someone owned this? Like, is it not as good
Mhm.
as it could be? That's a little too dark. That's a little too something. I can make that better. And then I do make it better. Then and my first instinct is, God, I hate to waste this. It's a beautiful,
Yeah.
it's still pretty good. But I go back to this place that says, well, if there's only going to be one original, I don't want any of the kind of flawed ones out there. So it's easy to get rid of them.
Oh my god, you kill your babies.
I
You
do.
you
That's
throw
part
them
of
off the cliff if they're not perfect.
I I do, but that's what it takes when you're having so many babies. When it's so easy to have children, I think you need to be discerning. Back when it was a lot harder, then maybe you keep them around. But yeah, hey, the first rule of photography, the first rule of writing, is that you have to kill your babies. It's never, it's not about getting rid of bad things. Usually, it's about getting rid of good things to make the remaining things better.
Who
And that
said that? I know what you're talking about. Where does that come from?
Well, that particular lesson came to me from an editor, a film editor, when I was making movies, Gabriella Cristiani, who
Mm.
edited The Last Emperor and
Mm.
other films. I worked with her on The Sheltering Sky, and she was the person who got me to understand there's that sense when you're editing things, whether it's text
Mhm.
or photos, that you're getting rid of bad stuff, like clear, like,
Mhm.
and I would call that culling. It's not really
Yes.
editing. You're culling out the wheat from the chaff, right? You're getting, and
Mhm.
now it's a smaller subset. That's just another version of what you did when you took the picture in the first place, which is culling from all of the experiences I have down to the ones that I'm taking a picture of. Now I'm culling through all the pictures I have down to the ones that are worth saving, and then I cull through all those to go through the ones that are worth printing. That's the artistic process. So,
Mm.
yeah,
So well
Gabriella.
defined. I
Yeah,
like
so
it.
Gabriella used to say that like there's this feeling that editing is throwing out bad things, but that's too easy. If it's bad, of course you throw it out. The hard part is that you're throwing out good things.
Mm. Things that don't make the cut. So
Mhm.
we've talked about art, we've talked about product, we've kind of talked about presentation because you talked about the matting and the framing. We always go next into E for educate, and I don't mean this as in educating yourself, although it can be that. But how do you educate your audience, your customers, your collectors as to the value of your work and to the story behind your work?
That's a tough one. I think you can't, I mean, I try really hard not to make that my work. Um,
Okay.
I think that that's why I don't sell more. Like, I think that if I was really trying to make a living from my photography, I would have to it's like they say, if you're a great baker, you make an amazing pie and you love making this pie, you're so good at it, and then at some point you have to open a pie shop because everyone wants it, and then one day you're sitting there hiring people and doing the accounting and marketing, and you're thinking, I just like making pies, and here I am running a thing. I feel like that happens with photography. You love taking pictures, you're good at it, people like it, and somehow you move up to a point that if you're really going to make money doing this, you have to turn it into a business. And you might like the business part, but the thing I mostly like is the photography part. And I can't go out and approach galleries all the time. I'm tired of marketing myself. It feels unsavory, and I'm just
Mm,
fatigued at this point in my life. And again, the best things happen when I stop caring and I just focus on
mm,
my own art and not worry about what its value is and whether people know
mhm.
about it. I'm just going to create the best body of work I can in my lifetime before I'm dead, and let other people sort it out. You know, that's it's mostly fatigue. I think I'm 57, and I think at this point I just don't want to turn my photography into too much of a business. The printing and
Although
framing, yeah, the framing was a business, and that was a startup company, but that wasn't a photographic business. I was just evangelizing people loving their own pictures enough that they would print them and frame them, which they weren't doing that much.
well, I think that's a brilliant business idea, but I think it's interesting that you say you're not educating when the beginning of this, we talked about your new online course where you're educating people. And I
True.
have found that that's one of the common threads
Well,
of successful creatives is that they educate in one manner or another, whether that be through workshops, whether that be through books, whether that be through online courses. It seems to be a common thread.
I think that's right, but I'm not educating with an objective to sell my work. I'm not doing it to educate about my work.
Oh, no,
I'm
no,
just
I don't mean it
educating.
like that.
Oh, oh,
It's
yeah.
not
Well,
that
I
base.
I love teaching people what I have figured out, and if it's useful to them, that's great. And I think I've spent my whole life educating. I've written, maybe 13 books over the past many years,
That's
and
amazing.
yeah, I mean, I like
So cool.
I like educating. I like trying to explain complicated things. The metric, of course, is if I can explain it to my mom, then I've made it simple enough. So I like taking complicated things and trying to make them understandable.
I
Um,
agree.
so that's yeah. I think that the educational component, it's great. I mean, that's the only way you grow, and I think that teaching people is the way you figure out what you don't know and what you really believe. There's no better
Yes.
way to figure it out than to stand up in front of a group and try to explain something, and then you're like, okay, I guess I don't really know what I think about this. So yeah, usually I'll teach when I write a book. It's not because I'm an expert, but it's because I have lots of questions and it needs to be a book on a topic, and I'm not getting the answers, and so I have to, damn it, I got to write it myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get it. No, well said. That is it. That is it there in a nutshell. I mean, That's this whole podcast.
Good. It is. It's like it's to figure out to answer your own questions. You do it, and that's why your podcast is good. It's that
Oh, well, thank you.
you're doing it from a genuine place. You're doing it from a place where you have questions. You want to talk to people. If you were doing it with a sense of an agenda, like I need to get people to buy that soap, it wouldn't be as good. I think.
I certainly don't have an agenda.
And that's good. That's fun.
I want answers. You can't
I
handle
want
the
answers.
truth.
I want answers too. I'm not sure we're going to get answers, but we have lots of good questions. So,
Yes, we do. So amplifying, how do you automate or, amplify means to scale to get bigger, but how do you talked about stepping away from a very busy, what sounds like a very busy career because these type of high performance companies probably demand a lot. And you stepped away from that for photography and to make your own work. And you say you've got thousands of images, hundreds of thousands of images in Lightroom. I mean, I get that. I think I'm up to like 80,000 and I've been trying to cull down. I think I managed to get down to like 60,000 the other day. But I mean, it's like, it's so time consuming, right?
right.
So,
Take
how do
fewer
you
pictures. I'm
Oh,
not
that's
joking.
not gonna happen.
No, no, no. I'm not actually being facetious. I think that people have these cameras, and so they're taking the word snapshot came about because that's the word of shooting a gun without aiming. That's how that
Oh.
term came about. And I feel like people take pictures sort of indiscriminately. They're not really
Mhm.
caring a lot about it. They might take a picture so that we end up, and even professionals, they're worse. They'll shoot hundreds of pictures of something just trying to
Oh, I
get,
know.
and then they spend all day in Lightroom or Photoshop, like trying to discern whether this one's a little better than that one. Is that a little better than, and I don't, I like it on film. You shoot, you see the picture, you take a couple maybe to see if you got it, and then you move on. Again, it's this idea of culling, of the word that I like to use, by the way, is synecdoche. Have you ever heard the word
Uh,
synecdoche?
no,
It's a
actually.
word from Greek poetry, and it's
Oh.
when the part of it's when the word is a part of something and it is representing something much much larger. So if you said
Synecdoche.
synecdoche, synechdoc. I'm not. I'd have to write it down. Um, but it's a poetic structure thing that they did. But I think that a part representing the whole is the very nature of photography. I don't need to take a picture of everybody in a crowd to get a sense that that's a crowd. I don't need to. If I'm taking a picture of you, I don't need to take a wide shot, head to toe, fully lit to say that's her. I can take a picture of your hand. I can take a picture of your eye. Like
Mm,
that's synecdoche. I'm taking a small part of something and I'm using it to represent a larger thing. And I can do
mm,
it in time. I don't have to take a million pictures of my vacation. I might take one of the beach, and suddenly that
mm,
represents all the pictures of that week. So I
mm.
think embracing this idea of synecdoche is key to understanding photography. And I think that when you take lots of pictures, you then just are kicking it down the road that I now have to do the culling on the computer instead of in the real world. And I don't know that that's the part I like about it. So I do
Yeah,
my synecdoche in the real world. I take fewer pictures than most professionally photographers, and I only edit briefly, and then I'm done. And I don't
I
spend.
like that. We hear about being in the moment, and I think sometimes as photographers and as artists, we can get so caught up in the creation and the capturing of the moment that we're not in the moment. And
Oh
it's
yeah,
a balancing, it's a fine razor point that we're balancing on.
agree. You're totally not in the moment when you're taking. I mean, it is a funny dynamic. You're both present and not present. I use a camera to hide. Like if I'm in
Mm.
social situations, I'm modulating my discomfort in a social situation by pulling the camera out. You know how war photographers are frequently getting gunned down because they stand up in the middle of a firefight, somehow feeling impervious to the war going on around them. But that's how we all are. You get behind a camera and you're not really there entirely. You're both there paying attention and you're there very present, but you're invisible and you're not fully experiencing the thing. It's through the lens, and I make it a point for me personally to take pictures and then stop taking pictures. Like I don't take it I don't walk around with the camera constantly. On vacations there might be a day that I bring my camera out, not constantly with taking pictures of everything.
I like that idea. We just went to the Heritage War Museum in Carlisle today and walked around. They have this display of all these military vehicles, and I was reading the placards, and I like to pick out the little art history tidbits.
Mhm.
And there was one about this photographer that went to D-Day and was on the beach, and he managed to shoot like 2 or 3 rolls of film
Did
on
it
the
get killed?
beach. No, he made it out, he
Yeah,
survived, he brought the film back, and would you believe the developer, dried out the film too fast and ruined almost all of it, and only 10 photographs, 10 or 11 photographs are left from that.
that's
Um,
heart crushing. Oh, can
I
you
know, right? But does that not make isn't that what we're talking about? It was unintentionally cold.
Mhm.
Um, he must have felt impervious or, maybe
I
this
bet he was
camera was
scared.
like a
I bet
mythical
he was
box.
scared shitless. I don't know if there's any way to get through that, from what I've seen of the movies of that beach landing. I can't
Yeah,
imagine just having a camera out there.
right?
I have seen
But
some of the
I'm
pictures from D-Day, yeah.
oh, yeah, so there's only a couple of his left, and I
So
was
you're
just like,
right.
"Wow."
You're right. The natural and life and history are natural colors. There might be 100 pictures in your
Mm,
collection, but the house burns down and only three are left, and you didn't pick the three, but those are the three that are left, and those are the ones that move through time.
right,
And you
right.
don't get to decide all that. So you just do the best work you can, and I think it's best not to worry about it so much. I don't know that we control it. There's so much luck involved with success anyway. It's not about talent. It's about,
Mm,
the same with startup companies. You can have a great idea, a great business, everything can be good people, a lot of money, and it fails. Why did it fail? Well, there's a million reasons. But I think
mhm.
people don't recognize the degree that luck plays a role. And I think that that's too
I'm gonna
bad.
have to disagree with you a little bit on the luck thing.
Tell
I
me.
personally think that it's persistence. I think it's doggonedness, persistence, and just being out there over and over again. As part of persistence, I'm going to say follow up, follow up, follow up, because I have had students that maybe weren't the best artists, but they were persistent and they got out there and they networked and just over and over again, they followed up, followed up, followed up. They were professional. They showed up, they did the work, they were easy to work with, they had a smile, they had a laugh,
You
and they
got
just showed
Yeah,
up, and
but the
showed up again and
no,
again
no,
and
no,
again.
no. You got a survivorship bias because there's lots of people who did everything you just no, 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 listen. There's lots of people who've done everything you just
Survivors.
described and it didn't work. It isn't
Mm,
enough. It's not enough to be persistent. I'm not suggesting that luck means that you just sit back and you hope someone discovers you. That's not what I mean. I mean that no
mm,
matter how much work you do and push on every lever, you're still you have to account for the fact that you still don't control all the variables. And it is whether you
mm,
succeed or fail is not just because you didn't try hard enough. You might have done everything possible and it just didn't take. It is there's always an element of luck in there, and no matter how deserving you are, how hard you try, I don't know that you completely control that. Now, the more work you do, of course, the more you put things in your column, right? I used to think of it like roulette. Like there's 42 spots on the roulette wheel, but every time if I have I work really hard, I can cover up a couple spots with tape so the ball doesn't go there. And if I have a gallery show, I can cover up a bunch more spots. So at the end of the day, instead of being 1 in 42, it's 1 in 10 when I roll it. It's still
mhm,
chance whether I get it. I've just moved the odds in my favor,
mm.
but I can't make it happen. I can just keep pushing things to increase my odds. That's about the best I can say it.
Well, now you're talking about probability.
Well, yeah, there's always chance. A chance involved. Someone happens
Mm,
to see your work, and they happen to be connected to the right person, or someone canceled at the last minute, and they were just looking, and they ran into you. And yes, if you hadn't put yourself out there, it wouldn't have been a possibility. But it still was counting on other events that you did not control that make it possible for you that person to succeed and this other person not to.
I think it's interesting. So what we're really talking about is a combination of of both things, this probability, increasing the probability chances of success by negotiating the factors,
Yes,
um, changing the variables, maybe living in a bigger city where you're exposed to more people, or
sure.
going and networking more,
But it's not
or
the only way,
yeah,
because you
yeah,
live in a small town, it still might work. It's just different. You have different things in your favor and against you, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah.
Very interesting.
But what
And
do
I
I know?
like,
I'm not making a living from selling my art. It's like, don't listen to me. I'm but I'm a career business person. I just recognize that making my photography my career of business isn't a smart one. Like I have to do that because I love it and I would do it anyway. As
yeah,
and the other businesses were businesses where I could actually control more of it and it was a little less personal and
mhm,
Netflix and Adobe and these businesses are they have ways that they work and I love startup companies. I love creative business. And being
yeah.
creative means you can apply you're breaking rules all the time. That's I was hired at Netflix because I was one of those weird people who was creative, not for,
Oh, yeah?
yeah. They called it a
They
wild
told you
duck.
that?
Yeah, yeah. The guy who hired me said he said that the position that he was filling, um, it's traditionally an MBA kind of position. That's what product
Mhm,
managers are, the directors of product. But he felt like the more you do of what you've done, the more you'll have of what you've got. And they were trying to, Netflix was young, and we were trying to figure out how to get out of the where we were, beating Blockbuster or not. And
mhm,
so he brought in a couple people into the product management role who were not MBAs. We had business experience, but we were
mhm.
different. We were unlike the others. And the term he used was wild duck. And what it was, we were just creative people. We didn't know all the
One of the
rules, so we didn't know what rules we were breaking, and we were just businessy smart. And I left after 3 years, but the other guy who came on as a wild duck is practically running the company. So
That's cool.
yeah.
One of these things is not like the other. That's really cool. I think that's really interesting. Um, Licensing and contracts. So you have a different take on your prints. How do you feel about licensing and contracts? And, this is a topic I like to hit on with the podcast because, well, we try and cover all the different creative fields. And so sometimes people say, no, I've never licensed anything, but they have some really valuable information on not being intimidated by contracts and things to look for. And other people have been on and talked about the importance and the incredible revenue that can be generated through licensing. Do you have any thoughts on licensing and contracts, especially since you're a photographer and you're taking this very different position about replication of your images?
Yes. I'm not because of my advanced age and
What?
relative success. I don't feel a lot of pressure to get images licensed. I can kind of take
Uh-huh.
the high road that my only interest is in creating the work and selling the prints, and most of its use online, I hope, is just like I said, sort of advertising for the picture. If you see it out there and you like it, then you might want to own it. So,
Mhm.
so I don't spend a lot of time on that. I have, by being in business, I've been involved with lots of business deals and contract deals and intellectual
Mhm.
property deals and stuff like that. But I
Yeah.
would not say that I know anything in particular about the licensing space of photography. And um, again, I just choose not to make that the thrust of my work. I feel like it would derail me a little bit. But maybe that's
Mhm.
the way I got. But ask me in a year, like when I've really been doing this for a lot longer, I might start, doing more licensing deals. It doesn't run antithetical to the printing. So since I am so focused on the sale of an original print, I'm open to anything that happens online, whether it's licensed or not. Just getting it out there. So
Interesting. That
yeah,
that is very interesting and a very different position, um, because you only make one print. You're so much more laissez-faire, shall I say,
yeah,
about
yeah.
the images. I know so many artists. I'm part of a group of art licensing ladies and gentlemen too,
Hmm.
art biz jam, and art agents, and and they focus a lot more on product. So watercolors and thematic work that can be very traditional and very holiday based or seasonal based, or those types of things. And there's a lot of talk about copyright infringement and about people stealing artwork and printing it poorly in China.
All the
And
more reason to only have one master print, because if there's anything else, if
mm,
someone sees your picture online and prints it themselves, we know that that's not a print. It's not signed, it's not the original. We know who has the original. There's no question that those are not valuable in that sense.
mm,
They're not the original. So that's another reason to support this sort of being very draconian about zero tolerance of other prints. you know?
Ruben, now I got a question though. That just made me think of something. So, in the old days with a print, they would destroy the negative. Like they'd write a big fat X over it, right? Once the edition was done.
hmm
But you have a digital version. What do you do with your digital file to ensure that there's never any other prints?
Well, I mean, I allow myself the opportunity to revisit it at some future date. Over time, I might reinterpret that image.
Do you put it in a folder and say
No,
this has been
no,
printed? Like,
no.
how
I
do
know
you
it's been
organize
printed.
it?
I have a database of all the prints that I've sold and which images are in them, so I wouldn't
Okay.
accidentally make another one. I serialize all my prints. I number them on the back. So I'm
Okay.
on like 527. So when I ever make
Okay.
a print, I put a number on it. I know what that print is, and it's in a thing. And then if it sells, then I note who has it. And um,
Okay, that's
yeah,
so easy. I
it's
like the
it's super
simplicity of that. So
simple.
you have a spreadsheet.
Yeah, a big one
Print
now.
1 is print 1, print 2 is print 2, all the way up to 500. They've got a title,
Yeah.
they've got a file name,
I
they've
know
got
what
the
paper I
owner.
used. I know this process. I have any information. And if for some reason I reprint it, it's because I'm revisiting it. It's like, you know what? I'm doing all my stuff darker now. And I think this is a moodier version. So it's incredibly clear it's not the other one. It's like, it's a totally different. I like it tiny. I'm going to make it.
Hmm,
And so I don't want there to be question of a provenance of the image. I don't want to wonder, is that the original? Is that you got to know anything about it? It's like, no, like a painting. That's either it or that's not it.
interesting. And then you said that that simplifies your pricing as well.
Yeah, I charge the same right now. I basically charge the same price for all the prints.
Interesting. I like the simplicity of
Yeah,
that.
that's simplicity is key. It's like it's your life. You can make your life crazy with
Like
managing stuff.
haiku.
Yeah, like haiku. All right.
Finally, S for success. So, how do you measure success and how do you celebrate your successes?
Well, I measure success just by my stress level being nice and low, and that I'm liking the work I'm doing. Like I basically go back through my work all the time, the digital
Mm,
files and the physical prints. And am I still happy? Do I feel like I'm growing? Is there evolution? Do I look, and the key is that when I look back at something from years ago, is it embarrassing? Like, oh God, I'm so much, I can't believe I thought that was so good and now I'm so much better. So it's a mixed feeling. I'm glad I didn't sell that
I
one. I can't believe I was talking about that so often when it's so shitty. So that's the
know that feeling.
so I like, it's important to have time and distance to make that judgment. And I celebrate success simply by being appreciative all the time of my sort of good fortune and that I have the opportunity to work this way. And I take a lot of time to be present with that. That I'm a
Mm,
lucky person on Earth right now, and it's hard to be upset about things when you're that person. Things are going well.
mm,
So
I like it.
yeah,
I
cool.
like it. Well, thank you. Thank you for being on. This
I,
has been
it's
fantastic.
great to meet you. And honestly, all I know about licensing, I learned on the last episode of your podcast. So
For real?
well, I was listening. I wanted to see what your show was like, and I listened to it. I was like, "Oh, that's cool. Oh, I didn't know
Which
that."
one did you listen
Yeah,
to?
but the guy who was the licensing pioneer.
Well, we're going into season 4. Were
Oh,
you talking about
and
Michael Woodward?
yeah, I think so. It was the end of the last season. It was probably 2 episodes ago.
Very cool, very cool.
This has
All
been
right,
great.
well,
Thank you.
it has, it has. Thank you. Do you want to learn how to make money with your art? but you're a little bit pressed for time and you don't have time to listen to every single episode? Well, we've made a free download for you at howtomakemoneywithyourart.com. You can get your free download, and it includes the top 4 things you need to do today to start making money with your art. So, if you want to learn how to make money with your art, but you're pressed for time, get the free download over at howtomakemoneywithyourart.com. All one word, no spaces, all spelled out. That's howtomakemoneywithyourart.com. Get your free download now.